Want to shout out one of our sponsors for today's video, the Hunter Burton Memorial Gaming to Prevent Suicide Tournament. This year they are having a cEDH Open, which is really awesome. The Hunter Burton Memorial Tournament has been an amazing institution of the Magic community for quite some time, and it's really cool to see them reach out to the Crimson Lion Games company and allow them to run a really solid cEDH tournament in the middle of this huge Magic event. It's going to be some amazing prizes for this event. I can't I'm not at liberty to say all of the amazing things that are going to be offered for this tournament, but I've been talking with the TOs and there's some crazy stuff for all the players who make top 16, and this is going to be a super sweet event. I've been to a Crimson Lion tournament before and it was absolutely an amazing time. They do not mess around when it comes to prizing, and the community is really awesome. This is going to be the entire weekend of Friday, March 14th to Sunday, March 16th, but specifically the cEDH event will be on that Saturday. So come check it out. It's going to be an amazing time, and yeah, I can't endorse this group enough. And the fact that once again they get to be a part of such an amazing piece of the Magic community, such an amazing tournament, and for an amazing cause is truly awesome. So shout out to the Hunter Burton Memorial Tournament, and shout out to Crimson Lion Games for getting us a cEDH tournament in the middle of this awesome event. Welcome back to Comedian MTG. My name is Ian, and today we are covering the Snowy Summit 2, an awesome Colorado tournament run by Fable Events. Fable Events has put on now 2 of these Snowy Summit tournaments, and I've gone to each of them. They have been an absolute blast to attend. Super professionally well-run events. Right now they've been doing one-day tournaments just as the TO group sort of gets on their feet, but they're looking to kind of pull out all the stops for the next couple events as well. So I'll leave the description to their website below on this video. Without any further ado, let's break down the top 16 deck lists from Snowy Summit 2. And I gotta say, there's some really interesting decks here today in this top 16. So I'd love to hear what your favorite one is down below. First up, we have Daniel LTD, or actually Daniel TD here with Timna. What the Dargo doing? This is a Mardu Timna list, one that we don't see, to be honest, that often. Mardu Timna has kind of fallen off the map since the bans of Dockside Extortionist, Jewel Lotus, Mana Crypt, and Nadu, but we have seen we're seeing this Timna Dargo list here today and doing some pretty cool stuff. Got a shout out right away that we have the Luca in the 99, which allows you to use its -2 ability to flip Dargo into a Hoarding Broodlord, which is a pretty cool, basically one card combo where you're putting your commander in the command zone, throwing down a Luca, and then flipping into a Broodlord. Some pretty cool stuff there for that. Also trying to abuse Dargo with things like Ruthless Technomancer. We love seeing an Arena Rector able to pull in your Planeswalkers as you cast Dargo, so it's kind of fun. If you have an Arena Rector on the battlefield, you're able to cast Dargo, sack the Rector to it, then you get to use Luca to exile your own Dargo and then flip into the Broodlord. So there's some really cool, interesting layering here, plus the fact that we have Dihada, and I'm wondering, is there a flicker? There does not seem to be a flicker in the sorceries, which is the classic Dihada Breach combo, but Dihada seems to be more just a value inclusion here in the 99 of this list. This is definitely a definitively turbo list. There is no ad nauseum in this list, but a lot of very proactive pieces. We got a Bolas's Citadel, we've got a Hoarding Broodlord, and we've got Peer into the Abyss as with a big payoff, not only for the Hoarding Broodlord line, but a big payoff on its own as well. So doing some really cool turbo stuff here. Demonic Console, definitely seeing some definitely increased amounts of play as the format starts to develop post bans. We're also seeing some Underworld Breach lines here with this deck, doing some crazy stuff with Goblin Bombardment in combination with your Commander Dargo. If you have Relic of Legends and any sack outlet, as long as you get to 3 sacrifices, you're able to actually start recasting Dargo, tapping it to the Relic of Legends to generate a mana, which gives you the red you need to recast Dargo. And usually with things like Bombardment, you can actually sack and deal infinite damage to your opponents, or with Altered Dementia, you're able to mill them out as well. So a lot of really cool Dargo-specific combos in here. We got some really cool Reanimator combos, and definitely a very proactive turbo plan here in this list. Also worth noting the Magda sort of combos with Dihada, as if you have one treasure with Magda, then you get 4 with Dihada, you're able to go put that Citadel right on the battlefield. So some cool stuff here from this Tymna Dargo deck, a deck that many people weren't expecting to see after the bans. We got Magda by BDN. This is you'll never guess a Magda list. This is a pretty normal Magda list here, trying to use its many dwarves and or pieces like Zorn to make an abundance of treasures and tutor out the Clock of Omens win with the deck, or in other circumstances is able to look at other things. For those who haven't seen Clock of Omens before, basically as long as you have an artifact dwarf, Clock of Omens, and Magda on the battlefield, you're able to create infinite tapped treasures, and with Magda's ability, you're able to search through your library and snag any number of artifacts or dragons when you have infinite treasures there. So a lot of the classic artifact dwarves, we've got our dwarves here that make treasures like Magda's own Magda. We have the brand new, I guess not brand new at this point, but our Bloomborough artifact shapeshifter changelings that really did a lot of work to add some cleanliness to the combos of this deck. So really cool stuff there. We also have, things like Facebreaker there just to provide you some general value, even though it itself is not a dwarf, and Roaming Throne, which truly, if you haven't seen Roaming Throne plus Magda, it does some pretty bonkers stuff when these dwarves start tapping themselves for mana, and especially when you start getting multiple copies of those dwarves and multiple copies of Roaming Thrones, just being able to tap and make an abundance of treasures. Mobile Homestead, one I haven't really seen previously in some other Magda lists. Also very exciting to know that there is a really cool vehicle for Magda coming from Aether Drift. So Magda might be getting a little bit of a boost even after its top 16 performance here today. So congrats to our pilot on this very sweet Magda list. We have Clavier here with Jake and Bake. This is a Jacob Hawken deck. So this deck I actually was able to play against in the Swiss of this tournament, and it was pretty sweet. We've got this Jacob Hawken character here that allows you to commander that allows you to draw a card, and then you exile a card from your hand face down. You also may pay 6 as this ability resolves. If you do, you transform Jacob Hawken into its backside, which is legendary enchantment Hawken's Insight. At the beginning of your upkeep, you exile top card of your library face down. You may look at it for as long as it's exiled. And once during each of your turns, you may play a land or cast a spell from among the cards exiled with this permanent without paying its mana cost. That's the payoff that we're looking for with this commander. Basically, in the early game, you are using it as a looter and sticking underneath it a series of horrifying monstrosities, things like 10 mana Ulamog, 10 mana Jin-Gitaxias, our lovely friend the Void Winnower, a different Jin-Gitaxias, and an abundance of ridiculous spells. Crazy things like Rise of the Eldrazi, an uncounterable spell that allows you to destroy a permanent, draw 4 cards and take an extra turn, or enter the Infinite, a spell that allows you to literally draw your entire deck. This deck is super sweet. It plays a little bit of mono blue control and a little bit of mono blue throw, omniscience onto the battlefield style deck. So does a lot of crazy stuff, able to wins with Mind over Matter in the One Ring. And if you're playing against Jacob Hawken, be on the lookout. This deck is trying to flip over its commander when it hits that 6 mana point, and then just start playing Haymaker after Haymaker after Haymaker. It's a really sweet, really cool deck, and to be honest, it's been out for a minute, so I'm glad it's starting to see a little bit of love, because I do think this commander does something pretty unique, and it's really cool to see it in the format. Jacob Hawken, able to make top 16, showing up, putting up good results here at this tournament. We have Dunk Zone here with Pew Pew Storm. This is a Ob Nixilis, the Captive Kingpin list. Honestly, this is one of the first Ob top 16s I've seen post-ban, and it's nice to see that the deck is still doing pretty okay. It's been a deck that really did suffer from the bans. Losing Dockside, Jewel Lotus, and Mana Crypt definitely hit Ob a little bit tempo-wise. And honestly, it's pretty cool to see it out and about. It's a list that a lot of people really, really adore. And as you notice, if you look through this deck, some things have changed with Ob. There's no more things like ad nauseum in the deck, just nowhere to be found. There are no Bolus's Citadels here in this list. Yes, they are on a breach plan, but the rest of the stuff seems to be a lot more focused on that grindy mid-range value, which is definitely a bit of a tone shift for Ob. But, maybe a necessary update given the fact that after the bans, it lost some of its greatest accelerants. So Ob transitioning into a bit of a slower mode, post-ban doing some really cool stuff. One of the newest cards is the Scrawling Crawler, which does ping all of your opponents and also forces everybody to draw a card on your upkeep. Well, with Ob Nixilis out, this is basically the equivalent of drawing 2 cards because you are pinging your opponents. Also, just whenever they draw a card, period, they lose a life. So it's not only triggering off that thing on your upkeep, but it's also triggering every time they draw a card for the rest of the game. So obviously, Scrawling Crawler is one that gets really out of hand with Ob Nixilis, giving you your own cards in exile every time this triggers. Really cool stuff out of these Ob decks. Definitely cool to see, as I mentioned, a bit of that tonal shift leaning away from the turbo plan that so usually accompanied Ob for something much more mid-range, much more grindy, and some really cool stuff there. There's a Saw in Half in this list, and it seems like a fair Saw in Half, so I'm definitely a little bit curious about that one. Also worth noting that they are playing the Agatha Soul Cauldron combos with Ob Nixilis. For those who are unaware of how this works, Agatha's allows you to exile your Walking Ballista underneath it. You put that 1/1 counter on Ob Nixilis, and then all of a sudden, you are able to ping, put a counter on Ob, and deal 1 damage to your opponents at a time while also exiling through your entire deck. Pretty sweet stuff. ToaMagic.com, also known as Tales of Adventure, has been a sponsor of this channel for quite some time, and they do not let us down. Toa Magic has almost 100,000 unique cards in stock, free track shipping on all of your orders, and next day or 2-day shipping available if you have a tournament that weekend. There's also on-site pickup. They will be at the Regional Championship in Portland, they will be at MagicCon Chicago, and they'll be at the Regional Championship in Charlotte. Toa is everywhere. As I mentioned, over 100,000 unique cards in stock. It's an amazing brand, and they do not mess around. The fact that you can pick up your cards at location of major events on top of having an amazing online store of shipping is sweet. It's got a ton of high-end inventory, from things like Ancestral Recall all the way to many cEDH staples. Toa Magic has it all, and if you use my code Comedian, you get 5% off your order at checkout. ToaMagic.com, check it out. We have Sherman5679 here with I'm Gonna Croak in My Cleanup. This is a Gitrog monster. Speaking of decks that I did not expect to see rocking our top 16s, the Frog is back. And boy, are we going to be talking a lot about frogs today, but I didn't expect it to be this one in particular. Gitrog monster here. For those who don't know, Gitrog is one of cEDH's most old and infamous decks. The whole point is that you are going to go down to your land base, find our lovely little land known as Dakmor Salvage, and if you get a discard outlet, something like a Putrid Imp, for example, you are able to discard it, trigger your Gitrog monster, and then basically mill through and draw through your entire library over and over and over again, executing some sort of loop as you go through the process. Frog has been a cEDH staple forever, and it's kind of crazy to see it up here in the top 16s, as it's just a deck that doesn't do that often. So really well done by our pilot Sherman5679 here to take a well-beloved, very popular cEDH archetype in the Gitrog monster and bring it into the year 2025, playing some cool new stuff, playing some really interesting things from Duskmourn, playing Mana Bond, Exploration Burgeoning, some really interesting 40-land Gitrog monster nonsense here in this top 16. We have Fizzy here with Glarb It Up. This was a big tournament for Glarbs. There were, I believe, 9 officially confirmed registered Glarbs in this 128-person tournament, which, shows that Glarb is here to show up and mess around. We got a Glarb Calamity's Augur here. For those who don't know, Glarb is our fun little Bloomburrow frog that allows you to surveil 2 by tapping it, and for playing things with mana value 4 or greater from the top of your library. already we're seeing some spice here with this Glarb. We got a Teferi Master of Time, a Teferi Temporal Pilgrim, which is definitely not one I expected to see rocking in these Glarb lists. We got Karn shutting down your opponent's artifacts, and Jace Wilder Mysteries being your Thassa's Oracle that is Glarb castable. We've got some other crazy stuff in this list, some high-end value, things like Notion Thief, Talion, Con Sphinx, Wandering Archaic, Seedborn Muse, a ton of value here in this Glarb list. We also have Loot, which seems to be a popular option in some of these land-heavy Glarb lists, just giving you additional land every turn and occasionally allowing you to flip into some pretty sweet value as well. This is a Doomsday Glarb list trying to reduce its library down to 5 cards, Glarbing allowing you to surveil 2 of them and cast those 4+ drops off the top of your library. Definitely see like a lot of these hybrid Citadel Doomsday Glarb lists. This one able to support a more proactive plan. We have Necro here as well, helping with a bit of the Glarb plan. And we have a lot of that, higher mana value interaction because guess what? You can cast it all off the top of your library with Glarb. Love seeing Legolas's Quick Reflexes, one of my favorite Glarb cards, as Glarb itself has Death Touch, so the ability to not only untap to surveil an extra time, but also to machine gun down your opponent's creatures is pretty sweet. So really cool stuff here from Glarb, and surprised and pleasantly surprised to see it continuing to perform here in cEDH. Also worth noting, there is Dramatic Reversal plus Kitsa in the list. Basically, if you have Kitsa and you put its prowess so that it has power up to 3, and you can use its ability to pay 2 and copy a Dramatic Reversal on the stack. And as long as you have the ability to basically activate this ability again, so basically you need 2 non-land mana sources, you can then proceed to untap all of your creatures over and over. And specifically with Glarb, that means, hey, I'm going to surveil down my entire library and play that Jace and win the game. We have Caboosinator here with Thasios Tymna, Snowy Summit 2. This is Thrasios and Tymna. This is a pretty standard Thrasios and Tymna mid-range list here in this tournament. This one is playing a decent redundancy of win cons. We have things like Swift Reconfiguration and Machine God's Effigy, which all combo off with Devoted Druid, basically able to make it so that your Devoted Druid is no longer a creature, but in fact some sort of machine, and able to untap itself and tap for green infinitely, making you infinite mana there as well. We have Kinnan and the Basalt Monolith, able to make infinite colorless. We've got our Enduring Vitality here, turning all of your creatures into mana dorks. We have Delny giving you double Tymna triggers, double Fairy Mastermind, double Orcish Bowmasters, and many, many more, like Esper Sentinel as well. Really cool value proposition here from this Thrasios Tymna list. We got the Brewmasters combo, so 3 separate ways to really make Devoted Druid work for you in this list. You have Thassa's Oracle, Demonic Consultation / Tainted Pact combos, although both in here. And apart from that, it's a pretty combo heavy, grindy mid-range version of Thrasios and Tymna that we should be pretty used to seeing at about this point in the metagame. We have Grant Eklund's here, Tymna, Crom, Blue Farm list. It is a pretty standard Blue Farm list at this point. A lot of the things that you're going to see that might stick out a little bit are a reasonably high artifact count, Cursed Totem in the 99, which is definitely solid against playing things like Kinnan, Glarb, and Thrasios Tymna, which we've talked about already on this breakdown. We also have things like Fire Covenant alongside your Ad Nauseam in these lists, and the rest of it's pretty similar to the average Blue Farm list. We have some Culling the Weak tech, which is kind of cool, giving you a little bit of a faster zip with this Blue Farm list. And apart from that, it's a pretty standard Blue Farm array. You're trying to win by resolving an Ad Nauseam, or an Intuition pile, trying to grab your Underworld Breach, send a win that way, or using your advantage engines, things like Mystic Remora, Rhystic Study, Smothering Tithe, gathering you a bunch of advantage on top of Tymna and Crom in the command zone. Also, we have things like Mnemonic Betrayal to win with your opponent's yards, and the ever classic Thassa's Oracle, plus, as I mentioned before, Demonic Consultation and or Tainted Pact. Today we're talking about the brand that I use to house my very own decks and deck boxes and dice and more We are talking about Heavy Play. Heavy Play is awesome. I use their products at literally all my events, even though I do not have to. It's because it's a good product and I love using it. Heavy Play makes amazing deck boxes, dice, playmats, etc. They have an amazing array of products, and if you use code Comedian, you can get 10% off your order. Working with Heavy Play has been awesome. When they first reached out to me, I was so excited because genuinely I love Heavy Play products, and I have been really excited about the possibility of working with them. And they've been sponsoring the channel for a bit. They're awesome. I love working with them. The product is high quality. I've been using their deck boxes for almost a year now, and nothing's happened to them. They look fresh as the day I got them, and they work like a charm. The whole Heavy Play setup, I'm so used to at this point. I love just opening up my playmat, locking my deck box in place, having my dice as a little pop-out tray. When I go back to try and use old playmats and old systems, it just does not feel the same. So heavyplay.com/comedian to get 10% off your order. They make amazing products to protect your cards. We have Phelan Z06 with Ashaya Elf Ball Turbo Storm. That's right, Ashaya Soul of the Wild. A mono green Ashaya list here in this top 16. And from what I heard from the field, it was kicking butt and taking names. This Ashaya list tries to make infinite mana in as many ways as possible, using the mono green synergies and just jamming some infinites before your opponents know what hit them. You have things like Ballista here as your outlet. For those who don't know, Ashaya actually has a number of different combos in its toolbox. So you can use things like Hope Tender and untap, because your things do become forests. You can untap Hope Tender and another land, whether it be a real land or a creature, and as long as it makes more than 1 mana, you're able to then go infinite with mana that way. You're able to do things like that with Fanatic of Ronus. You're able to use things like Argothian Elder, which allows you to untap 2 lands. But when Argothian Elder itself becomes a land, it makes that pretty easy. Same thing with the Ley Weaver. It allows you to untap 2 lands, and it itself can become a land with Ashaya on the battlefield. We have the Root Path Purifier here, allowing lands you control and lands in your library to be basic. So dodging things like Magus the Moon, stuff like that, but also allowing you to use land fetchers to get some pretty cool stuff onto the battlefield. You also have the Nissa combos here, meaning that if you are using the classic Ashaya combo, so Quirion Ranger and Squib Ranger, basically if you have something that taps for at least 2 mana with Quirion Ranger, 3 mana with Squib Ranger, you are able to bounce them because they become forests over and over again and untap those permanents as long as you have your Commander Ashaya on the battlefield. Oof, here shutting down some of the non-green decks of the format. Makes sense that if your deck is so green, Mandadoric heavy, that you would want to be able to hate on your opponent's strategies as well. We've got Beast Whisperer here as one of the outlets for infinite mana, because if you're bouncing any of your Rangers over and over again, you're able to draw through your entire library. We already have an Elf Tutor here with Sky Shrub Butcher, which can get, honestly, a lot of the combo pieces in this deck, including things like Argothian Elder or the Quirion Ranger and whatnot. Yeva here, giving all of your green creatures flash, very important for getting into that combo space. We got a Yisan in the 99, or some really cool stuff here from this mono green Ashaya list. You've got a lot of payoffs for that infinite mana, as we can see here in the sorcery section, and a decent amount in the instant section as well. We got a Bind, which is to counter an activated ability and draw a card. Counter spells coming out of green, which is pretty cool. And then Infection Despite, which is actually after you start looping with most of these mono green decks, the ability to recur Infectious Bite and cast it over and over again is often how you're actually going to kill your opponents. And it does get through a 1 ring, because it says each opponent gets a poison counter, not that they get targeted. So that's pretty sweet as well. Definitely really cool stuff here from this mono green Ashaya list, doing some really powerful, unique stuff here in cEDH. Mono green may be able to take some names down. We have Costly here with Is It Nadu cEDH. This is Ral Monsoon Mage, and I'm so glad that Ral is starting to show up at these tables, because I've been a believer of this card for quite some time. Ral allows you on the front side to reduce the mana value of your instants and sorceries by 1, and then whenever you cast instant sorcery, you flip a coin. If you flip heads, you can either flip Ral or nothing happens, and if you flip tails, you take a point of damage. Basically, Ral on the backside says it enters with loyalty counters on it for each instant sorcery cast this turn. So as soon as you cast 6 instants or sorceries in your turn, you're trying to hit heads and flip your commander because you want to get to this bottom ability. It says exile the top 8 cards of your library. You can cast instants and sorcery spells from among them for free. This is the most stormy storm deck that ever stormed. This is a 50 instant or sorcery Ral deck. I'm actually curious, how many lands are they on? Yeah, only 20. 20 lands in the cEDH deck. This deck is as low to the ground as one deck could possibly be. It's got instants and sorceries for days, so many rituals, and so many storm payoffs. I cannot believe I am looking at a 20 land cEDH deck. Also, it gets to play Storm Splitter, which is one of my absolute favorite cards ever designed, and I'm so happy to see it in a cEDH deck. Storm Splitter is so cool. Every time you cast an instant or sorcery, you make a copy of it. It really gets out of hand. Basically, 1 instant or sorcery. There are 2 Storm Splitters, 2 instant or sorceries, 4 Storm Splitters. Things get really out of hand really quickly when you start pushing Storm and splitting it indeed. Really cool stuff here. A lot of crazy instances of sorceries. I could go on and on about all the unique cards in this deck, but almost every instant or sorcery in this deck is often unique to this format. So this is one you really got to take a deep dive in yourself, but congrats to our pilot for taking this absolutely off the wall 20 land Ral Monsoon Mage versus Ral Leyline Prodigy deck. This is super cool and just absolutely wild to see. All right, we have Nick Knack here with Bad at cEDH Farm. We have here a Timna Crom list, and boy oh boy, we gotta shout out the description of it. It's Bad Farm because I'm bad at cEDH, and it's a blue farm list. Shout out to the secret Denver tech in the creature section. Now, what could they possibly be talking about? Oh my gosh, it's a Con Sphinx. I also have to ask myself, is this a Nas deck? This is. So this is a relatively standard blue farm list, except for they said, hey, let's just play a Consecrated Sphinx in the 99 of this deck. And honestly, that's pretty sweet when you expect all of your opponents to be locking down with Ristics and Mystics, and you get to say, well, you know, if y'all are going to turtle up, I will happily try and break parity and draw all of the cards. Really cool stuff from this blue farm list, doing a little bit of innovative stuff, some scheming symmetries, which is not always the most popular option. Really cool with your own opposition agent. We have Flare of Duplication there, able to sack some of your red creatures and get a little bit of extra free interaction in the cEDH list. A decent amount of artifacts for the artifact count, and Artist Talent, a really cool piece that I'm starting to see in a number of diverse strategies. But here it says whenever you cast a non-creature, you can discard a card to draw a card. So able to sort of rummage away some cards into your graveyard for when you're trying to set up your breach lines. It's not very often that I get to say, hey, Blue Farm's doing some cool, innovative stuff. But yeah, rocking that creature Consecrated Sphinx while still playing Ad Nauseam is definitely something really cool to shout out. So congrats to our pilot for making top 16 with this list. We have Freedom Waffle here with Kinnan, NBC, no bad cards except Endurance. This is Waffle's list that he ended up doing pretty well at the Royal Rumble with as well. We played, and he was one of my losses for this tournament because he had a pretty sweet natural Kinnan Basalt on turn 3, which was a bit of a rough one. But Waffle's been doing pretty decently here with this Kinnan list, and the idea is it's almost like a counter metagame version of Kinnan, playing things like Copy Enchantment, Mirror Maid, Copy Artifact, Mystic Ristic. Basically, the idea is that this Kinnan list is going to be copying and taking and breaking the Ristics and Mystics and all of that stuff, using things like Clever Impersonator to become copies of Ristic Study and things like that, and basically hyper aggressively try and abuse that play pattern while also doing the Kinnan thing, which is just doubling your mana and doing a bunch of really cool stuff. Playing Emrakul the Promised End, which is definitely interesting in Kinnan, because if you flip into it, it doesn't really do a whole lot, but if you cast it, boy, does it do a lot of work. We all know how I feel about Emrakul on this channel. It's a card I truly adore. So cool stuff here from that. Definitely an interesting suite of interaction. I know he plays a Dramatic Reversal kind of just as a tempo piece. You'll also notice that there's no Cephalid Coliseum for a lot of the instant speed lines. Waffle tends to use Fairy Mastermind and cloning Smothering Tithes, according to him, as one of his primary instant speed wins. So really interesting stuff there from that. I think I definitely prefer the Cephalid Coliseum lines, but I've heard his reasoning for why he does it this way, and it definitely makes sense. Some interesting stuff here for that. Imposter Mech, which, you know, not traditionally much of a Kinnan piece, but we have it here in this bit of an atypical Kinnan brew. So congrats to Flurry Waffle on your top cut. Before we get into our top 4, I want to remind you that we do coaching here on Comedian MTG. So if you're interested in taking that next step up in the cEDH level and getting your game where it needs to be one of the players up here in these top results, feel free to hit me up at comedianmtg@gmail.com or any of the places in the description down below. Spoiler alert, I ended up coaching one of the people in this top cut, which was really awesome and super, just always one of those super proud moments as a coach to see my clients doing really well at big events like this one. Snowy Summit was an awesome event, and I'm excited to keep breaking it down for you all. We have Combat Wombat here with Timna Thrasios, Admiral Akbar. This is a Timna Thras mid-range list, definitely doing a lot of the stuff that we talked about in our earlier version of this. And this is also one of the lists that I took an L to in the match. It was actually my last round of Swiss. Because I recognize the chain stasis that ended up killing us. This one's super unique. Basically, if you have a Bloom Tender or a Fabro Elder and it's able to make 4 colors of mana, chain stasis allows you to go through and make a super aggressive infinite mana untap loop with it. And it can be executed at instant speed, so that's pretty sweet. We've also got Vizier of Remedies, which is a pretty atypical Devoted Druid win condition piece. We saw a list earlier with multiple Devoted Druid win lines. This one, no Machine Gods FG, but they are on Swift Recon, and they are on the Hazel's Brewmasters as well as the Vizier. So a full creature Devoted Druid combo, which is kind of interesting. No Kinnan in this cEDH list, which is kind of surprised me, as there's a lot of tapping and untapping synergies here with these dorks. We have also Freed from the Real, which does go infinite with the Fabro and the Bloom Tender, like we talked about with the Chain Stasis. So some kind of unique choices here in this cEDH Thrasios Timna list. Things like Fiend Artisan, Divining Witch, which is your demonic consultation on a stick. There's some really cool, unique stuff here that you don't always see in Timna Thrasios. Actually, oh, and an Aether Vial, which is kind of cool to be able to cheat in some of these creatures for a little bit cheaper. So definitely playing some pretty unique stuff here with this TNT list, and congrats to our pilot for taking down the top 4. Well, getting into the top 4, I guess. We have Pheno Dreams here with KT Razor Cake, aka Blue Farm. This is Pheno Dreams version of the Blue Farm archetype. We've got Teferi, the Time Raveler here, which was not present in our other Blue Farm lists. This one's definitely a little bit closer to the standard Blue Farm list and playing a bit of the more proactive plan that some of them are playing. You know, with the Windfall Wheel of Fortune, Jessica's Will plan that was sort of illustrated initially by Tremnek over in Europe, playing his Snapback Flare of Duplication package as well. So this list is very close to the Tremnek special. Things like Necropotence, you can tell that indicate this more proactive style of Blue Farm. So really interesting stuff here. Very low artifact count, only 11 artifacts with a Mox Opal. And I guess you can count the Esper Sentinel as well, but definitely a very lean, low to the ground, and a little bit more explosive version of Blue Farm. That's pretty interesting to see. We have Jacob Wynn, one of my favorite players in the cEDH community, with Flip It or Rip It, which is awesome because Jacob has been playing 6-mana Narset even after the bans, which is awesome. I totally thought this deck was dead in the water, but Jacob, who is a Narset aficionado, said, no, thank you. I will not be kept down. Narset's going to keep pushing. Narset Enlightened Master here, a 6-mana first strike hexproof commander that allows you to exile the top 4 cards of your library, and until the end of the next turn, you may cast non-creatures, exile with it without paying their mana costs for free. We have Teferi Time Raveler here, able to disrupt your opponent's plans. Jace Wielder of Mysteries, a way to finish off the game when you have no more library available to you. We've got some interesting creature suites here. Grand Arbiter, able to reduce the cost of your commander while also disrupting your opponent's plan. Myrel, basically the equivalent of a silent effect, allowing you to go into your turn for the combo with relative ease. You got Flame Squirrel Celebrant, which is mostly here for the Revel in Silence behind casting costs, able to silence your opponents very aggressively. When talking with Jacob about this new version of the deck, he mentioned, yes, we've upped the silence effects to be able to handle some of the things in the new metagame. And then you might notice the classic Narset package, which is just turns, 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 turns. It's Mind's Desire, turns, turns, turns. Extra turns all around. Narset is trying to attack, rip a bunch of extra turns, and basically bleed your opponents out of interaction by just taking turn after turn after turn after turn. Really cool stuff here with Wipe Away, a split-second removal spell for any permanent. Really cool to be able to bounce problematic creatures or permanents that are stopping you from winning the game. A lot of artifact acceleration here to get out that 6-mana commander as efficiently as possible. We've got things like one with the multiverse, basically an omniscience for this deck. 26 lands, although, you know, those 26 lands channel into a lot of these artifacts, and you want to get that Narset down as quickly as possible, if not playing a early advantage engine that allows you to get the pieces to play Narset as early as possible, and then attack and loop those extra turns until your opponents are dead in the ground. Hell yeah, so exciting to see a top 4 here from Jacob. This deck is awesome, and I love seeing him play it. It's super sweet, and a deck that I also have had an absolute blast when I've played it in the past, and probably would love to play it again. So yeah, let me know what y'all think about me ripping this one up for a tournament sometime soon, because it's probably one of my favorite commanders of all time, and I'm definitely looking forward to this one. Congrats, Jacob, on the top 4. And we have JDM Watt with cEDH. I stare at the top of my library. It stares back. This is the client I alluded to, which was super awesome because we worked on this deck, you know, the week before this tournament. Now, they did make a few changes that I'm super excited to talk about before this, but we have a Glarb Calamity's Augur here winning this cEDH tournament. We actually did play in the Swiss as well, which was a really cool experience. This is a Death Touch 2/4 Surveil Tour, like we talked about earlier. Really cool stuff here from this version of the list. We have Dryad of the Elysian Grove. We talked about the multiple land drops that we talked about with loot in the earlier version. This version is playing Bane of Progress, however. You know, we talked about people trying to abuse the aggressive Rhystic Mystic meta, and here we have a Bane of Progress saying, you know, actually, I'd rather my opponents just start playing things the old-fashioned way, one land drop at a time. We have things like Notion Thief to disrupt your opponent's card draw, Con Sphinx to go over the top, draw a bunch of cards, Seaborn Muse, give you surveils on every single turn. Speaking of anti-enchantment hate, we have Reverent Silence, which allows you to let each of your opponents gain 6 life and destroy all enchantments. The enchantment hate in this deck is not messing around. Now, yes, this deck does play its own slew of enchantments, including Copy Enchantment, Rhystic, Mystic, Counterbalance, Sylvan Library, Necro, and Exploration, and yet very willing to throw all of that progress away for some disruption on your opponents. We've got a lot of these spells that have higher than 4 mana value that you can chuck off the top of your library. As we mentioned with the previous version, we've got the Dramatic Reversal here because we have Kitza in the 99 of this deck. Kitza, once again, just a good generic value piece, but also able to loop Dramatic Reversal over and over again. And with this version of the deck, you're able to surveil through your entire library. Now, we don't have a Jace Wielder of Mysteries here, but there's a number of different ways in which you can win after you surveil through your entire deck. So it's not exactly that complicated to be able to win at that point, especially when you have infinite mana and infinite surveils with your commander. Really cool stuff here from this cEDH Glarb list. As I mentioned, Glarb showed up in good numbers in this tournament, and yeah, it's super awesome to have a client take this whole thing down. Congrats, JDM, for showing up and letting his Moistness Glarb take down this cEDH tournament with some sweet high mana value permanents, ripping off the top and making Sultai look good in the modern metagame. Thank you all for watching this video. If you enjoy videos like this, please make sure to find the like button, the subscribe button, and just smash the living heck out of them. It helps out the channel a ton, and it allows you to know when videos like this drop. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will catch you next time. Peace.
In your eyes, I see a fire lighting up as we're getting away. There's no going back, and I'm loving the taste of where you go. I follow when I'm giving up, never hitting the brakes. There's no going back, and I'm loving the chase. We're not giving up, never hitting the brakes. There's no going back, and I'm loving the chase.
It's 3:40 in the morning, so I'm gonna go to bed.